Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum everybody. Today we're going to talk about the muscles of the sole of the foot. Now when it comes to the foot, there is a total of 20 individual muscles in the foot. Out of these 20 muscles, 2 are present on the dorsal aspect of the foot. The remaining, out of the remaining 18 muscles, 14 are present on the plantar aspect of the foot, while 4 are intermediate in position. And these 4, of course, are the introitious muscles. But the muscles of the sole of the foot are present in a form of 4 layers. And we're going to study all of these individual layers of the muscles of the foot to get a better understanding of how all of these muscles are present, where they originate from, and where they are attached. So the muscles of the sole of the foot, as we just said, are arranged in 4 layers. Now, as opposed to the hand, we do not need very fine movements of the foot, because obviously we do not do any intricate work with the foot. The main purpose of the muscles of the foot is number 1, to support the longitudinal arches of the foot. Now, these longitudinal arches of the foot undergo various tensions and pressure during the various phases of walking. And during these phases of the gait cycle, the muscles provide support to these longitudinal arches. And the arches then in turn bring about balance, as well as providing protection to the delicate structures which are present within the sole of the foot, like the arteries and veins and the nerves. Now, these muscles of the sole of the foot also are responsible for refining the actions of the long muscles, right? And by the action of these small intrinsic muscles of the foot, the balance is maintained while a person is walking on uneven ground, right? So if you're walking on an uneven ground, various movements of pronation and supination and inversion, eversion, and flexion by the combined effort of all the muscles is brought about, which results in a proper balanced gait on an uneven ground. So let's talk about the first layer of the muscles of the sole of the foot. Now, when we talk about the various layers, we approach these layers from a superficial to deep aspect, right? So the first layer would be the most superficial, and the 4th layer is the deepest. So the first layer of the muscles of the sole of the foot includes 3 muscles, right? 2 of these muscles are abductors and 1 is a flexor. The 3 muscles included are the abductor hallucis, the flexor digitorum brevis, and the abductor digiti minimi. Now let's talk about the abductor hallucis first of all. Now, as the name indicates, it is an abductor, and hallucis means that it is going to act upon the big toe, right? So this muscle is basically an abductor of the big toe. Now, the origin of this muscle is that it originates from the calcaneus. Now, the calcaneus has a tuberosity, and the tuberosity then in turn has a medial and a lateral tubercle. I'll show you these tubercles and the tuberosity in just a minute. So, the origin of the abductor hallucis is that it originates from the medial tubercle of the tuberosity of the calcaneus. In addition to that, it also originates from the plantar aponeurosis. Now we'll talk about the plantar aponeurosis in more detail in subsequent lectures. But just like the palmar aponeurosis, there is also an aponeurosis known as the plantar aponeurosis in the foot. So the abductor hallucis muscle gains its origin from the calcaneus as well as from the plantar aponeurosis, right? And so this is the calcaneus. It has a tuberosity here, and then this is just a part of the calcaneus that I've drawn here. And so it originates from the, so this of course is the medial side, because you can see this is the big toe here, and this is the origin of the abductor hallucis muscle. So it originates from the medial tubercle or the medial process of the tuberosity of the calcaneus, and then it goes all the way here, and then it gets inserted into the medial aspect of the base of the proximal phalanx of the big toe, right? So this is the first digit or the big toe, and it gets inserted into the medial aspect of the base of the proximal phalanx of the big toe. So now if you look at the position of this muscle, you can easily tell that once this muscle contracts, what it is going to do is that it is going to bring about abduction of the big toe, since it is attached to the medial aspect of the base of the proximal phalanx. Now abduction and adduction in case of the foot happens when you take the second digit as the reference point, right? So when the digits move away from the second digit, which would be like this in this direction, that would mean it is abduction. And when all the digits move towards the second digit, that would be adduction, right? So if there is contraction of this muscle, it's going to move the big toe away from the second toe, and that is known as abduction. So the abductor hallucis brings about abduction of the big toe by moving it away from the second digit, and it is this muscle is supplied by the medial plantar nerve. Now the medial plantar nerve is a branch of the tibial nerve, and it supplies the abductor hallucis muscle. So here you can see the abductor hallucis muscle here, right? So it's taking its origin. Now this here is the tuberosity of the calcaneus. There's a medial processor tubercle and a lateral processor tubercle of the tuberosity of the calcaneus. So here you can see the abductor hallucis muscle. So it's going to go here and get inserted into the medial aspect of the proximal phalanx of the big toe. Let me just show you that as well. Right, so here you can see it has been cut off, but this here is the tendon of the abductor hallucis muscle, right? Okay, so the second muscle in the first layer of the muscles of the sole of the foot is the flexor digitorum brevis muscle. Now the flexor digitorum brevis muscle originates from the medial tubercle of the tuberosity of the calcaneus, right? So we just talked about the two tubercles of the tuberosity of the calcaneus. So it originates from the medial tubercle, and along with that it also originates from the plantar epineurosis as well as intermuscular septa. Now this then splits into 4 tendons, right? So the flexor digitorum brevis then splits up into 4 tendons, and these tendons then in turn further split up into 2, right? So each of these 4 tendons then splits up into 2 and gets inserted on either side of the middle phalanx of the lateral 4 toes. So the hallucis, the muscles which have the term hallucis in them, are responsible for bringing about movements of the big toe. So the flexor digitorum brevis is going to bring about flexion of the lateral 4 toes, right? So the flexor digitorum brevis splits up into 4 tendons. Each tendon then further splits up into 2 and gets inserted on either side of the middle phalanx of the lateral 4 toes. Now it is also supplied by the medial plantar nerve, and this brings about flexion of the lateral 4 digits. So here you can see the flexor digitorum brevis muscle originating from the medial tubercle of the tuberosity of the calcaneus, as well as from the plantar epineurosis here. This is the plantar epineurosis which has been cut off, and this also gives origin to the flexor digitorum brevis muscle. So then the flexor digitorum brevis muscle then splits up into 4 tendons. Now the tendons of the flexor digitorum brevis muscle actually overlie the tendons of the flexor digitorum longus muscles, right? So these are more superficial and they lie on top of the tendons of the flexor digitorum longus muscle. And when I say they lie on top of them, it means they lie superficial to them, right? So the flexor digitorum longus tendons are deep, and the flexor digitorum brevis muscle tendons are they are superficial. Now these then split up into 2 and get inserted into the middle phalanx. Right, so here you can see the flexor digitorum brevis tendon. Right, so underneath you can see the flexor digitorum longus tendons, and more superficially you can see flexor digitorum brevis tendon, which then splits into 2, and in between these 2 parts of the brevis tendon, the single tendon of the flexor digitorum longus muscle then passes between these and gets attached to the distal phalanx. The flexor digitorum brevis, however, splits into 2 and gets attached to the middle phalanx here, this one. Now the third and last muscle in the first layer of the muscles of the sole of the foot is the abductor digiti minimi. Now again, as you can tell from the name of the muscle, it is responsible for bringing about abduction of the little toe, right? And digiti minimi, of course, means the little digit or the little toe. Now when it comes to the origin or the proximal attachment of this muscle, this proximal attachment is from both the medial as well as the lateral tubercle of the tuberosity of the calcaneus. Along with that, the plantar epineuritis also gives origin to the abductor digiti minimi muscle. Now this muscle is inserted onto the lateral side, the lateral aspect of the base of the proximal phalanx of the little toe, right? So just like the abductor hallucis muscle, I have not shown it here, but it gets inserted here onto the medial aspect of the proximal phalanx of the big toe. The abductor digiti minimi gets inserted onto the lateral aspect of the proximal phalanx, the base of the proximal phalanx of the little toe. So when this muscle contracts, it is going to move the little digit, the little toe, away from this second digit. So as a result, abduction will take place, and this is how the abductor digiti minimi brings about abduction of the little toe. It is supplied by the lateral plantar nerve, and along with abduction, both the abductor digiti minimi and the abductor hallucis muscle also bring about flexion of the big toe as well as the little toe. So here you can see this is the abductor digiti minimi, right? And it takes its origin from the medial as well as the lateral tubercles of the tuberosity of the calcaneus, along with the plantar epineuritis, and then it gets inserted onto the lateral aspect of the proximal phalanx of the little toe. So this cutoff tendon here shows the insertion of the abductor digiti minimi muscle. Okay, so now let's move on to the second layer of muscles of the sole of the foot. Now in this second layer, there are only 2 muscles. So these 2 muscles comprise the second layer of the 4 out of the 4 muscular layers of the sole of the foot. Now these 2 muscles include the Quadratus Plantae and the Lumbricals. Now the Quadratus Plantae is also called as the Flexor accessorius muscle, right? Now Quadratus Plantae, as you can see here, this is the Quadratus Plantae muscle. Now this originates from the calcaneus. Now where from the calcaneus? from the medial surface of the calcaneus as well as the lateral margin of the plantar surface of the calcaneus. So you have the calcaneus, the medial surface of the calcaneus, as well as from the lateral margin of the plantar surface of the calcaneus. This is the origin of the Quadratus Plantae muscle. And then it gets inserted onto the lateral aspect of the tendon of the Flexor digitorum longus muscle here, right? So the Flexor digitorum longus muscle from the posterior compartment of the leg passes inferior to the medial malleolus and moves obliquely at an angle, and the tendons are then inserted into the phalanges. So the Quadratus Plantae muscle gets inserted into the lateral aspect of the tendon of the Flexor digitorum longus muscle. Now what it does is, so this is why it gets the name the Flexor accessorius, because it serves as an accessory muscle. It helps the Flexor digitorum longus muscle in bringing about flexion of the lateral four toes. Now since the Flexor digitorum longus muscle is at an angle here, right? So if it was in this way and there was no pull of the Quadratus Plantae, the line of action of, or the line of action of pull of the Flexor digitorum longus would be at an oblique angle, right? So it would be at, it would not be a straight line of pull by the Flexor digitorum longus tendons. But because of the straightening, because of the action of the Quadratus Plantae muscle, it aligns the line of pull of the flexor, not this one, but on the lateral four toes, the Flexor digitorum longus tendons. So it aligns the line of pull of the Flexor digitorum longus tendon in a straight manner. So this is the Quadratus Plantae muscle. It is taking its origin from the medial aspect as well as from the lateral margin of the plantar aspect of the calcaneus, and it gets inserted into the tendon of the lateral aspect of the tendon of the Flexor digitorum longus. And now the Quadratus Plantae is also supplied by the lateral plantar nerve, right? And the action, of course, is that it assists the Flexor digitorum longus in bringing about the flexion of the lateral four toes. Now the second group of muscles in this second layer is the lumbricals. Now there are four lumbricals, and these take origin from the tendons of the Flexor digitorum longus muscle, right? If you remember the hand, we talked about the lumbricals in the hand as well, and those originate from the tendons of the Flexor digitorum profundus muscle, right? So in case of the foot, these lumbricals also take origin from tendons, and in this case the tendons are the tendons of the Flexor digitorum longus muscle, right? So here you can see the lumbricals. They take origin from the tendons of the Flexor digitorum longus muscle. These white ones are the tendons of Flexor digitorum longus. Now these lumbricals then cross this joint here, which is the metatarsophalangeal joint, right? And then they get inserted onto the extensor expansion of these four toes, right? So just like in the hand, their action would be, the action of these lumbricals would then be that once these lumbricals contract, they bring about flexion at the metatarsophalangeal joints of these lateral four toes and extension at the interphalangeal joints of these four lateral toes, right? So, and that happens because the lumbricals cross the metatarsophalangeal joint and get inserted into the extensor expansion here, and that is why the dual nature of action of these lumbricals, which is flexion at the metatarsophalangeal phalangeal joints and extension at the interphalangeal joints of the lateral 4 toes. Now, when it comes to the nerve supply of the lumbricals, the medial one is supplied by the medial plantar nerve, and the lateral 3 are supplied by the lateral plantar nerve, right? And once again, they flex the bring about flexion at the metatarsophalangeal joints and extension of the middle and distal phalanges of the lateral 4 toes. So for now, this is all we're doing, the first 2 layers of the muscles of the sole of the foot. In a subsequent lecture, we will talk about the muscles in the 3rd and the 4th layer of the sole of the foot. Thank you.